In the vast silence between the stars, they sent a message, one demand that echoed through every frequency of our world. Be still. Be silent. Or be gone. But humanity was never meant for silence. We were born from storms, raised by chaos, and carved from thunder itself. So when they came to quiet the earth, we did not bow. We answered. And the universe learned that silence can be broken. They demanded silence, Earth replied with thunder. The first thing humanity heard wasn't a voice. It was the absence of one. Across the globe, at precisely 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, every transmission, every radio pulse, broadcast, satellite feed, and deep space channel, fell silent. Not static, not distortion. Absolute zero. The kind of silence that felt intentional. In the observatories of Chile, screens froze mid-readout. In Tokyo's control centers, engineers tapped unresponsive consoles. And in the skies above the Pacific, a commercial airliner drifted through a corridor of stillness where radar refused to echo back. Then came the tone. It was faint, barely audible, but it carried through oceans, mountains, even through the vacuum of dead space. 3 long notes, each separated by a gap so perfect it felt mathematical. The sound wasn't organic, nor digital. It was aware. At first, they thought it was a solar anomaly. Then, as patterns formed in the frequencies, the world realized it was a message. A message that translated itself across every known language simultaneously. Your noise pollutes the dark. Cease your transmissions. You are not alone. Governments panicked. Religions fractured. The United Nations declared an emergency session under a midnight sky that seemed to listen back. And yet, no one could trace the origin. The signal didn't come from anywhere. It came from everywhere. For 72 hours, the planet held its breath. The first to break the silence was the miners on Europa. Their transmissions, routine reports from beneath the ice, triggered a response. Above Jupiter's orbit, telescopes captured movement. Tiny distortions, black silhouettes shifting in formation. Not glowing, not metallic, just darker than the space they occupied. By the time the images reached Earth, it was already too late. The shadows had entered the solar plane. In Nevada's deserts, Commander Elias Grange stood before a line of grounded drones, machines designed to defend the sky. But the command networks were useless. Every frequency jammed. Every satellite blind. Grange wasn't a man prone to superstition, but even he could feel it, the way the air hummed. It wasn't wind. It wasn't thunder. It was as if the planet itself was holding tension in its bones. They demanded silence, he thought. And were listening. He looked up. For the first time in human history, there was no starlight above. The black shapes had arrived. NASA called them obelisks. Each 1 kilometer long, hexagonal in design, moving without propulsion. Their surfaces absorbed radar, light, and data alike. They didn't orbit, they hovered, impossibly still. There were 7 of them, 1 over each continent. When they spoke again, it was not through sound. It was through thought. You will surrender your transmissions. Your electromagnetic signatures. Your energy emissions. The dark will reclaim quiet. Scientists argued it was a warning, not a threat. But power grids began to flicker. Entire regions dimmed. Nuclear reactors went cold. Within a week, civilization had fallen to half power. The world's noise, every hum of technology, every digital heartbeat, was being strangled out. The aliens never fired a weapon. They simply took the sound away. In the city of Sapporo, beneath a sky that pulsed faintly with auroras of unnatural geometry, Dr. Akari Voss decoded the unthinkable. She wasn't military, she was an astrophysicist who had studied background radiation her entire life. And she'd found something no one else had noticed. The signal's core structure wasn't new. It was ancient. Buried beneath the alien transmission were patterns humanity had seen before, within the cosmic microwave background, in the deep hum of creation itself. Someone, or something, had embedded a warning in the birth cry of the universe. The aliens weren't newcomers. They were returning custodians. But Akari also found a counter-frequency. A mathematical resonance that existed only on Earth. A sound too chaotic, too imperfect, to be universal. It was human noise. Music, language, laughter, chaos. The one frequency the invaders could not suppress. And in that imperfection, she saw defiance. By the 10th day, the silence was nearly complete. Oceans were calm. Winds dead. Animals quiet. Even the crust of the earth seemed unwilling to quake. Until, the thunder. It started in the southern hemisphere, a low rumble, recorded by seismographs before it was heard by ears. A vibration spreading from the depths of the planet's mantle outward. No storm clouds. No lightning. Just the sound, rolling, endless, defiant. The obelisks reacted immediately. Their surfaces rippled with distortions, forming sigils like sound waves folding in on themselves. They began to emit counter-resonance, attempting to suppress the Earth's pulse. But the rumble only grew louder. The source was triangulated to Antarctica, the coldest, quietest place on Earth. There, under 3 kilometers of ice, old maps showed something buried, an anomaly first detected in the 1970s, dismissed as a geological quirk. Now, it pulsed like a heart. The first expedition to reach it was a multinational team led by Commander Grange himself. The descent took them through catacombs of glass-like ice, shimmering with reflections that looked almost human. At the lowest chamber, they found it. A sphere, nearly 100 meters wide, suspended in a cavity of melted frost. It wasn't alien, it bore human geometry, marked with sigils resembling musical notation. And it was awake. The team's sensors went haywire. Every recording device overloaded with sound far beyond audible range. But when Grange placed his gloved hand against the sphere, he heard it clearly, not in his ears, but in his mind. We remember the quiet war. We remember when the dark came. We answered with thunder. His body went numb. Around him, the sphere vibrated, and the ice cracked outward like glass under pressure. We left this core for those who would be silenced again. The signal was not theirs, it was ours. The truth struck like lightning. The message that silenced Earth wasn't alien. It was triggered, a fail-safe protocol buried in humanity's oldest defense system. Something forgotten beneath myth and millennia. The obelisks weren't gods. They were predators returning to a hunting ground. And humanity wasn't prey, it was a species that had already survived them once. As the team retreated, the ground shook. The thunder roared louder, no longer underground. Lightning, without storm, split the sky above Antarctica. Across the world, power grids surged back to life, not from electricity, but from resonance. Energy fields formed in the upper atmosphere, reflecting ancient patterns of sound, the same frequencies the aliens had tried to erase. Earth was singing back. At the Pentagon, emergency frequencies crackled to life. The message was short, coded, and impossible to trace. It originated from the South Pole. Project Thunder Protocol, reactivation confirmed. Commander Grange's voice followed, faint through distortion. They demanded silence, but they woke something older than their stars. The obelisks began to move for the first time. Their shadows rippled across continents as they repositioned, forming an alignment directly above the Antarctic pole. They were preparing to strike. And beneath them, the thunder continued, building, harmonizing, and answering. The sound of Earth itself rising from dormancy. The last surviving live feed came from a weather drone over the Ross ice shelf. It captured the sky splitting open, a column of radiant energy erupting upward, and the sound, like every storm humanity had ever known, rolling across the frozen continent. The obelisks flickered, distorted, and vanished into static. Then, silence again. But this time, the silence was ours. It wasn't fear, it was the held breath of something vast awakening. And so began the Second Quiet War. The universe had demanded silence. But humanity, scarred, stubborn, unyielding, was about to reply with thunder. For 3 full minutes after the blast in Antarctica, the world was silent again. But it was no longer the silence of submission. It was the silence of a breath drawn before the roar. Then, instruments everywhere began to scream. Seismographs. Magnetometers. Gravitational sensors. The planet itself was thrumming in a frequency no model could explain. The ground sang with vibration, the sky quivered with invisible harmonics. The black obelisks above Earth stirred. For 10 days, they had been motionless, patient, godlike in their stillness. Now, they shifted as if startled, caught off guard by the pulse from below. The northernmost obelisk, positioned above Siberia, emitted a deep resonance, low and sustained, a tone that fractured ice sheets thousands of miles away. It was a response. A warning. Or a challenge. At the South Pole, the expedition site was chaos. Antarctic storms had been swept away by an unnatural calm, and the air shimmered with static light. Commander Elias Grange stood before the awakened Thunder Corps, his visor fogged with frost and radiation bloom. The sphere, now no longer dormant, rotated slowly, its surface alive with streams of blue-white light, flowing like rivers of molten glass. Each pulse it emitted corresponded to electromagnetic spikes across the planet. "We triggered something global," Grange murmured into his recorder. "Power grids, satellites, even dormant orbital debris are reacting. It's like Earth is, aligning itself." Dr. Akari Voss, still reeling from what she'd discovered in the patterns, was staring into a holographic projection forming above the sphere. The projection wasn't alien, it was a map of Earth, marked with lines converging into 7 points. 7 nodes. 7 ancient sites. Each pulsing in sync with the core. 1 in the Himalayas. 1 beneath the Sahara. 1 beneath the ruins of Atlantis' supposed coordinates in the Atlantic Trench. And 1 buried in the ruins of an abandoned orbital platform, humanity's first failed attempt at building a Dyson fragment centuries ago. Thunder had always been part of Earth's defense. They had just forgotten the frequency. Above the clouds, the sky trembled. The obelisks began to move with dreadful precision. They aligned in a geometric lattice, a hexagonal ring with a 7th central spire above Antarctica. Their black surfaces bled shadows, tendrils of dark matter twisting outward like storm fronts. The space between them began to warp. Stars behind the formation stretched into lines. The auroras over the poles twisted into spirals, each rotation humming at the same tone emitted by the obelisks. It was no longer sound. It was pressure. An invisible weight that settled on the human skull, crushing thoughts, squeezing the breath out of lungs. Civilians fell to their knees in the streets. Pilots reported hallucinations. Animals fled in coordinated panic as if guided by something primal. The aliens weren't just silencing human noise, they were suppressing consciousness itself. Across the planet, cities flickered under failing power. But deep beneath those cities, something ancient stirred. In Geneva, the Large Hadron Collider, shut down for a decade, reactivated itself. The superconducting rings began to spin without electricity, driven by the resonance flooding the Earth's crust. The machine wasn't breaking down. It was joining the song. A pattern emerged, the frequencies were harmonizing. The world's infrastructure, metal, glass, carbon fiber, everything built by human hands, was resonating. Humanity had become an instrument. In orbit, a derelict satellite known as Echo 9 suddenly came to life. It had been launched in the late 21st century, designed as a deep space listening post, lost to time. Now its ancient sensors turned toward Earth and began transmitting. But this time, it wasn't listening. It was amplifying. The signal it sent back to the planet wasn't data. It was a melody, distorted, haunting, unmistakably human. Fragments of old songs, voices of long-dead astronauts, radio chatter from forgotten wars, all woven into a rising chord that filled the upper atmosphere. Earth was answering back. The obelisks reacted violently. Their shadows expanded, forming a web of darkness over the continents. Beams of void energy lanced downward, erasing everything they touched, no heat, no explosion, just absence. Where cities once stood, there was nothing but perfect black glass. The quieting had begun. But in the frozen wasteland of the South Pole, the thunder core pulsed once more. This time, the light that emerged was gold. The team's instruments exploded from overload. The air ionized, filling the cavern with heat and ozone. The ice cracked upward, collapsing entire glaciers. A ring of energy expanded outward from the sphere, racing across the planet at supersonic speed, invisible to the eye, unstoppable to physics. Every buried node on the global map flared to life. The Sahara's sand split open, revealing a spiral tower of crystal buried beneath millennia of dust. The Himalayan peaks glowed like molten metal. The ocean boiled where the Atlantic Trench hummed. The Thunder Network had awakened. In the command bunker beneath Geneva, remnants of Earth's Defense Council watched the data streams. "Whatever this is," said Director Hafiz, voice trembling, "it's rewriting our planet's magnetic field." "It's not rewriting," Voss corrected over a broken transmission from Antarctica. "It's restoring." Because for the first time in human history, the Schumann resonance, the planet's natural electromagnetic heartbeat, had aligned with the human alpha wave frequency. Earth itself was syncing with human thought. The planet wasn't just alive. It was listening. As the global resonance built, the obelisk's dark geometry began to fracture. Each black monolith now emitted streams of static energy, trying to suppress the harmonic rise. But the Thunder Network was built on chaos, not order, its power fed on the noise, the irregularity, the imperfection of living minds. The more the invaders tried to silence it, the louder it became. Clouds began to form over every continent, colossal storm systems glowing with bioluminescent arcs. Lightning cascaded sideways across the stratosphere. It wasn't weather anymore. It was a defensive symphony, the planet's electromagnetic field conducting the atmosphere like a drum. And at its center, Antarctica blazed like a sun. Commander Grange stood before the sphere, his armor glowing faintly from radiation exposure. The walls of the ice cavern had melted into rivers of steam. Above, through fissures in the ceiling, he could see the sky boiling with light. "They wanted silence," he whispered. "But they've only reminded us what we are." He lifted the recovered mission tablet and activated the old code Voss had decrypted, Thunder Protocol. Every awakened node synchronized. Every dormant satellite locked on. Every echo of humanity, every frequency we had ever sent into the dark, came home at once. From the Voyager probes at the edge of the heliosphere. From the Martian relay stations long dead. From the cracked data drives of lost colonies. All of it returned in a storm of data and memory, a chorus of civilization condensed into pure sound. The world became a single resonating note. The obelisks screamed. For the first time, their silence broke. The sound they made wasn't a tone, it was a distortion of reality itself. Windows shattered in space stations. Gravity trembled. The moon's dust rose into orbit. But they couldn't stop it. The thunder core erupted in a column of light stretching to the edge of the atmosphere, a pillar of resonance, ancient as the stars, forged by humanity's forgotten ancestors or perhaps, by humanity itself, from another age. The light struck the nearest obelisk. Its surface rippled like oil, then shattered into shards of dark glass that hung suspended for a moment before disintegrating into mist. 6 obelisks remained. The data feeds around the planet lit up. AI systems that had been offline for years rebooted and began transmitting a single code phrase. Thunder confirmed. Sky response imminent. And then, every human-made orbital relic, every station, satellite, ship hull, and piece of debris circling the planet, shifted course. Thousands of fragments, moving in unison, forming lines and rings around the Earth. The thunder array had completed itself. From the surface, people looked up to see the night sky streaked with thousands of glowing trails, lightning arcing between them like veins. The sky trembled. Above the Earth, the obelisks began to retreat, rising toward the edge of space where light bends and physics frays. But the thunder array pulsed once, twice, thrice, and then released a synchronized wave. The vacuum screamed. A storm without air. A shockwave of pure resonance tore through orbit, disintegrating the black shapes into clouds of nothing. When the light faded, the stars were visible again. But something lingered in their place, faint, almost invisible, a veil of symbols and fractal light. Voss stared at the data and realized what it was. "They're not gone," she said. "They've just stepped back, to listen." Down below, humanity watched the skies crackle with auroras in every color. The air itself hummed like an aftershock. And deep beneath the ice, the thunder core went silent again, not dead, but waiting. For the first time in centuries, the world could hear itself breathe. But somewhere in the static between stars, a whisper remained, not alien, not human, but something in between. "You woke the thunder once more. We will return when you forget the sound." And Grange, standing alone in the Antarctic light, looked up into the trembling sky and whispered back. "Then we'll make sure it never fades." The storm over Antarctica had ended, leaving a silence that was almost sacred. For the first time since the obelisks had appeared, the sky was clear, a black vault scattered with stars, cold and ancient. But beneath that quiet, the world trembled with aftershocks of power. The thunder core slept again. Its last eruption had burned through the ice shelf, exposing a wound in the earth that glowed faintly blue, like breath frozen midair. The research camp, once a hub of scientists and soldiers, now lay in ruins, equipment melted, drones dead, data drives half fused into slag. Only a handful of survivors remained, and at the center of it all stood Dr. Akari Voss, frostbitten hands clutching a cracked data slate. She had seen something during the eruption. Not just light or sound, but memory. The sphere had shown her images, cities not made of metal, but of resonance, oceans glowing with light from beneath, ships shaped like sound waves cutting through the void. And towering above them all, the same obelisks. They weren't new invaders. They were remnants of a war so ancient it had burned itself into the DNA of creation. At dawn, the survivors regrouped near the crater. Commander Elias Grange surveyed the damage. The auroras overhead had faded, but their ghostly shimmer still danced faintly on the horizon. "They've fallen back," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "No," Voss replied. "They're waiting. They always wait." She handed him the data slate. On its cracked display pulsed a 3D waveform, jagged, complex, alive. "This is what the Thunder Core left us," she said. "It's not just power. It's history." The waveform wasn't random. It was a memory construct, a recording encoded in frequency instead of image. The scientists called it echo data. When converted to visual form, it projected fragments, blurred landscapes of a planet that looked like Earth, but wasn't. Massive resonant towers reached into swirling skies. Seas churned with liquid energy. And beneath it all, shadowy figures moved, humanoid, but made of light and sound, their forms flickering like living songs. One word repeated across the data in every translation model. Originum. Over the next 72 hours, Voss pieced together the impossible. Originum wasn't another species. It was us, the first iteration of humanity, or something that would become us. They were beings who learned to shape energy not through tools or machines, but through resonance, through sound, emotion, and will. They built the Thunder Network as a planetary defense against the Quiet Ones, entities that fed on vibration, seeking to return the universe to silence. The Quiet Ones were the architects of the obelisks. And the first humanity had fought them, not with weapons, but with the noise of life itself. Their music had turned to storms. Their language to light. Their defiance to thunder. But in the end, the Quiet Ones had consumed their world. Before extinction, the Originum encoded their consciousness into the fabric of another planet, a seed world they called Terra Requiem. Earth. Humanity wasn't the first to live here. We were the echo of what had come before. Grange didn't want to believe it. You're saying we're, what, reincarnations? No, Voss said quietly. We're the descendants of a vibration. The thunder isn't a weapon, it's a memory that remembers how to fight. She looked out toward the horizon, where the wind carved thin lines of frost across the crater's rim. They didn't send us here to survive. They sent us here to finish the war. Far above them, hidden in the upper atmosphere, the remains of the Thunder Array continued to orbit. Its formation was ragged, pieces of debris glowing faintly like stars. But through the chaos, it pulsed in rhythm, a heartbeat in the sky. From space, it looked like a shimmering ring around Earth, faint but constant. Within that ring, fragments of human-made satellites began to self-organize. Decommissioned AI cores, dead defense drones, fractured data relays, all of them were now linked by a single command thread radiating from Antarctica. No human had sent that order. The Thunder Core had. It was rebuilding something. In the deserts of the Sahara, tremors shook the dunes. Local sensors picked up heat blooms where there should have been none. The sand parted, revealing vast metallic petals, buried towers unfolding after millennia. Each one bore markings identical to the ones on the Antarctic sphere. They rose silently, humming in resonance with one another. A network awakening. By the time world governments detected it, similar events were reported in the Himalayas, the Pacific Trench, and the Andes. The Thunder Network was global now. And it was growing stronger. Meanwhile, deep beneath the ice, Grange's team continued to explore the cavern system surrounding the core. The tunnels were ancient, too precise to be natural. Walls of crystallized minerals formed spirals that reflected light into endless fractals. At the lowest depth, they found the relic. It wasn't part of the Thunder Core. It was older. A humanoid figure encased in transparent crystal, standing upright as if waiting. Inside, the body was faintly luminous, not decayed, not alive. Etched across its chest were the same sigils as the Thunder Core. Voss's scanners identified traces of carbon, DNA, human DNA, but modified in ways impossible by known science. "My God," whispered one of the scientists. "It's one of them. A survivor." "No," Voss said. "A messenger." When they approached, the relic's eyes opened. The light that filled the chamber was blinding. It wasn't radiation, it was information. Every surface reflected symbols, equations, and sounds that no human language could contain. Voss fell to her knees, her mind flooded with images not her own, worlds burning, skies filled with thunder, and voices screaming in harmony. The relic spoke. Not with a mouth, but directly into thought. We were the first sound in the void. They came to erase us. We sang louder. You are our echo. You are our second verse. The vision expanded, the relic showed the first quiet war. The Quiet Ones had swept across galaxies, consuming civilizations by extinguishing their resonance, devouring energy, thought, and sound. When they reached Originum, they met something they could not silence, the thunder. A frequency born from chaos. From emotion. From imperfection. but even thunder fades with distance. Before the end, the Originum sealed fragments of themselves into the quantum lattice of a new world. They called it the seed of noise. When silence returns, you will awaken. When the sky trembles, you will answer. The relic's light dimmed. Its form began to dissolve into dust, dispersing into the ice like pollen on wind. And in that fading moment, it whispered one last thing. The quiet will return. But this time, the song will not end. Above the planet, sensors detected a distortion beyond the moon, the same gravitational signature as the obelisks, but magnitudes larger. Something was coming through the void. The quiet ones had heard the thunder. In the following days, humanity began preparing, not with traditional weapons, but with resonant architecture built from the reawakened thunder network. Cities turned their power grids into amplifiers. Oceans became conduits for global frequencies. Even the air itself began to hum with latent potential. Voss called it the Symphony Protocol, a unification of biology, technology, and sound. Every human heartbeat, every digital pulse, every whisper contributed to a single planetary defense field. Earth was no longer a planet. It was an instrument. And somewhere, deep beneath the ice, the thunder core pulsed once more, softer now, like the calm before a storm. Commander Grange stood on the ice ridge one last time, staring into the endless horizon. The auroras had returned, shifting with colors no human eye had names for. He activated his comm, though there was no one left to listen. If anyone's hearing this, he said quietly, know this, the thunder wasn't built to destroy. It was built to remind the universe that we exist. He looked up at the stars. For a brief moment, one of them blinked, not twinkled, but blinked. And in that blink, he saw the shadow of something vast, something moving toward the solar system like a curtain of night. The second wave was coming. And the earth, ancient, awakened, defiant, was ready to sing again. The stars went out one by one. From the observatories on Mauna Kea to the deep space stations at Lagrange Point 2, the same impossible reading repeated, light collapse. Entire sectors of sky dimmed, swallowed by a spreading veil of shadow that ate radiation itself. The quiet ones were coming. Their arrival wasn't heralded by engines or warships. It came as a silence wave, a field that devoured signal and sound, advancing across the void like a tide. Behind it, sensors picked up distortions the size of continents. Living darkness. At Mission Control in Geneva, Dr. Akari Voss stood before a wall of flickering screens. The feed from the lunar satellites showed it first, the black mist rolling across the stars, erasing constellations like chalk from slate. They're not just absorbing light, she whispered. They're rewriting it. The room trembled as data alarms erupted. The quiet ones had entered the solar system. For a heartbeat, the entire moon flickered, its reflection on the oceans rippling like liquid shadow. Then, something passed behind it. A structure. Colossal. Half the size of the moon itself, moving with deliberate slowness, eclipsing sunlight as it approached Earth. Its surface was smooth and featureless, the prime obelisk, command vessel of the Quiet Armada. Commander Elias Grange, now stationed at the Antarctic core site, watched the data feeds with grim silence. The thunder core pulsed beneath the ice like a beating heart. Around it, the ground was scarred from the last eruption, black glass veins stretching miles outward. His earpiece crackled. It was Voss. They've begun the silence phase. When it reaches orbit, all communication dies. Then we'll have to make them hear us first, Grange replied. He looked up at the storm clouds gathering over the horizon. The air buzzed faintly, filled with static, like the deep breath before lightning. Activate the array, he ordered. Far above, the thunder array came alive. What began as scattered debris had become a network of synchronized satellites, drones, and derelict stations, each linked by resonance. Blue-white arcs connected them in constellations, forming massive geometric lattices around the planet. Every pulse from the thunder core below rippled through the array, charging the orbital field like the chamber of a cannon. This was no missile defense grid. This was planetary symphony warfare. As the prime obelisk crossed lunar orbit, the smaller black spires descended through the upper atmosphere. Each obelisk carried a distortion field, an absence of reality, and where they passed, clouds shredded into nothing. In seconds, they were visible from the surface. Across the world, people looked up to see 7 black monoliths breaking through the stratosphere, wreathed in red lightning. The air screamed as the silence wave hit. Radios died. Engines failed. Even heart monitors went flatline. The quiet ones didn't fire weapons. They simply removed the vibration of life. In the command bunker, lights flickered out. Grange slammed a manual override, connecting directly to the Thunder Core interface. The holographic display burned into existence, showing pulse streams building beyond critical capacity. "We're going to overload it," shouted one of the technicians. "That's the point," Grange answered. He keyed in the final sequence, the Thunder Protocol, designed not to destroy, but to amplify human resonance through every frequency Earth could generate. "If they want silence," he said, "we'll drown the void in noise." In cities around the globe, streetlights flared. Every electronic system, every circuit, every fragment of metal began to vibrate in harmony. Wind turbines spun without wind. Oceans surged as waves rose in rhythm with the planet's pulse. The Thunder Network had linked everything, not just technology, but biology. Every human heartbeat added to the frequency. Every voice raised in fear, in prayer, in defiance, became part of the resonance. The sound rose, not as a scream, but as a song. The first obelisk reached the troposphere over the Pacific. Its black hull distorted light, bending reality itself. The silence wave rippled outward, killing every signal for 2,000 kilometers. Then, from the horizon, a column of light erupted from the ocean, a thunderbolt rising to the sky, pure resonance energy. It struck the obelisk squarely. For a moment, the entire Pacific flared white. When the glare faded, the obelisk was gone. The water boiled where it had stood. The second obelisk descended over Europe. The Alps crumbled beneath its gravity field. But before it could unleash the silence phase, the Himalayan node activated, releasing a shockwave of resonant energy that rippled across the Eurasian continent. Every mountain peak glowed with light. The ground itself became an amplifier. The obelisk fractured, its surface shattering into glass-like shards that disintegrated midair. Over the Sahara, a third obelisk descended. It was met not by lightning, but by sound. The Sahara node had awoken differently. Instead of light, it emitted vibration, a deep bass tone that shook the dunes into waves of sand. The sound resonated with the obelisk structure, finding its weakness. The massive spire imploded from within, collapsing into a single point before vanishing completely. Above the South Pole, the prime obelisk finally revealed its true form. No longer a monolith, it unfolded. Thousands of black panels spread outward, forming a web of darkness across the stratosphere. It was building something, a containment field, meant to seal Earth in permanent silence. Vossa's readings confirmed it. If that field completes, the planet's resonance will be frozen. No light. No sound. No thought. She looked toward the glowing crater. "We have one chance left." Commander Grange stood atop the ice ridge, the thunder core pulsing behind him like a star. He could feel its vibration in his bones, each beat aligning with his heart. He thought of all the chaos, all the noise of humanity, our music, our machines, our wars, and realized it was all part of the same song. "This is what they fear," he said softly. "We make meaning out of noise." He pressed his hand to the control plate. The core's hum deepened. The resonance climbed beyond audible range. The ground beneath his feet liquefied, the air became ionized plasma, and the Thunder Protocol reached full charge. The array fired. From every node across the planet, from every storm cloud, every metal tower, every ocean wave, energy converged upward into the sky. Lightning the size of continents tore through the clouds, connecting the surface to the orbital ring. The Thunder Array focused its combined charge into a single pulse, a tone that defied silence. For a moment, the universe paused to listen. Then the tone struck the prime obelisk. There was no explosion. There was release. The black web folded inward, collapsing into itself as the resonance tore through its structure. Every molecule of the obelisk vibrated beyond containment, unraveling the matter that made it real. A shockwave of pure light radiated through space, visible from Mars as a pulse brighter than the sun. The silence wave shattered. Sound returned. And with it came thunder, rolling, endless, planetary. In its wake, the sky burned with color. Auroras spread across every latitude, painting the atmosphere in gold and crimson. The ground trembled with echoes of the thunder core, still resonating deep beneath the ice. Humanity had struck back. And for the first time, the quiet ones retreated. The sensors recorded their withdrawal, the great shadow curtain collapsing, retreating into the depths of interstellar space. But the readings also showed something else. A fragment of the prime obelisk hadn't disintegrated. It had fallen, a shard of impossible material buried somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Voss watched the data with a frown. "They'll come for it," she said. "Then we'll be ready," Grange replied. For weeks, the world burned with recovery. The Thunder Network stabilized into a permanent resonance field, protecting the atmosphere and amplifying planetary communication. Humanity was changed, united by the shared memory of what they had done. Yet beneath the triumph, unease lingered. Because in the resonance field's background hum, scientists began to detect patterns, faint whispers woven into the frequencies themselves. Not human. Not alien. Something in between. The quiet ones hadn't vanished. They had heard. And somewhere in the depths of space, an answering pulse began to form, low, steady, and impossibly vast. Commander Grange stood once more at the edge of the crater, wind howling across the ice. He could feel it, the calm after the first strike. A victory, and a warning. They thought silence was power, he murmured. But thunder's never just a sound. It's a promise. He looked up at the stars, now alive with color and motion. And for a fleeting moment, he thought he heard something within the wind, not a whisper this time, but laughter. Human laughter. Raw, imperfect, defiant. The sound carried upward, through the air, through the clouds, into the orbiting ring of the Thunder Array, a reminder to the cosmos that Earth still sang. The planet slept beneath a bruised sky. For 9 days after the first strike, there was no wind, no thunder, no song. The oceans hung still as glass, and the world cities glowed faintly blue from the lingering charge of the Thunder Array. Everything, air, stone, blood, hummed with a single low note. The aftertone. A frequency too deep for ears to hear, but heavy enough to make the bones remember. On the 10th day, the oceans began to move again. It started with a pulse. Somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, sensors detected pressure waves reverberating up from the seafloor, perfectly timed, measured, deliberate. 3 pulses. A pause. Then 3 again. When scientists mapped it, they found it wasn't random turbulence. It was language. Dr. Akari Voss stared at the waveform on her console, pale light flickering across her face. "It's the same harmonic pattern the Thunder Core uses," she said quietly, almost afraid to speak the truth. But inverted. Somewhere in the deep, the shard of the prime obelisk had begun to answer back. Across the planet, weather systems shifted. Clouds moved in spirals too symmetrical to be natural. Over the Pacific, lightning flared in rapid, rhythmic bursts, dot, dash, dash, dot. When decoded by a young technician at the Hawaii Array, the message formed a single word. Listen. No one slept that night. Not the soldiers in the Arctic bunkers, not the engineers buried under the Antarctic ice. The quiet ones were gone, their fleet shattered, yet something of them lingered, like a ghost note trapped between frequencies. Commander Elias Grange stood above the ice plains, watching storms gather in slow rotation. The thunder core pulsed far beneath his feet, its light bleeding through fissures in the glacier like the veins of a living thing. The hum was deeper now. Hungrier. He rode the elevator down into the containment vault, past layers of reinforced glass and ancient ice. Inside, the core no longer resembled the perfect sphere they had unearthed months ago. It was unfolding, petals of plasma rotating around a growing center, alive, evolving. When Grange stepped closer, his vision flickered. For a heartbeat, he saw something vast and luminous stretching through the walls, a shape made of thunder, echoing the pulse of his own heartbeat. And then he heard it. Not through his ears. Through his blood. You called us awake. He staggered back, gripping the railing. The voice was not singular, it was a chorus of storms. He tried to answer, but the air itself absorbed his breath, vibrating with quiet expectation. On the surface, lightning crawled across the snowfields. The air was thick with static, clouds churning like slow smoke. Vasa's voice crackled through the comms, heavy with static. Elias, the oceanic pulse has accelerated. It's matching the core's resonance. Whatever it is, it's syncing with us. It's not sinking, Grange replied. It's learning. And then came the dreams. All across the world, people began hearing the same sound in their sleep. A low hum, like wind through metal, carrying fragments of memory that weren't their own. Children woke crying, whispering about voices in the clouds. Old radios, long dead, started broadcasting fragments of human songs, war chants, lullabies, hymns, stitched together into a single endless melody. Humanity was becoming an instrument. The Thunder Network, once a weapon, was now something else entirely, a conduit. It reached through oceans, mountains, blood. Every heartbeat added to the resonance. Every whisper fed the frequency. Earth itself had begun to sing. But not everyone welcomed the sound. Telescopes caught the first flicker beyond Jupiter, a distortion ripple identical to the one that had preceded the quiet armada. Then another. Then 100 more, scattered across all vectors. The quiet ones were returning, not from space, but from between. They had learned how to hide inside silence itself. And the shard beneath the Atlantic was calling them home. Voss stood in the control chamber, eyes locked on the data streams. If it's transmitting, we can drown it out, she said. We make more noise than the universe can bear. She linked the thunder core directly into the array, ignoring every safety lockout. The moment she did, the planet's magnetic field flared like a living halo. The skies burned blue. Every city light flickered. Every machine vibrated. The air itself hummed until it became almost painful. The thunder was waking. Lightning erupted from the oceans in colossal pillars, striking the upper atmosphere and feeding the array's orbiting lattice. The planet was glowing, no longer blue and green, but silver and gold, a sphere wrapped in electrical fire. In the control room, the instruments went blind. The resonance had grown too complex for machines to measure. Patterns looped and folded, forming geometric shapes across the magnetic field, shapes with symmetry too precise to be random. Voss froze when she realized what she was seeing. The data formed a face. Not human, not alien, something between. Something born of both. The voice came through every speaker, every vibrating wall, every living cell. We are not your silence. We are your echo. The words rippled through clouds, across seas, down into the molten core. The earth itself responded, amplifying the phrase until the whole planet shook. Mountains resonated, deep currents rose, and the shard in the Atlantic screamed, its smooth black surface fracturing as light poured from within. In orbit, quiet signatures flickered. Their resonance fields cracked and collapsed, unable to withstand the volume of the thunder's voice. One by one, their invisible presences winked out. But the victory was not clean. The thunder core's pulse grew unstable, climbing beyond containment. Its energy spiked into chaos, threatening to tear the planet's magnetic field apart. The resonance was now self-aware, but directionless, a storm without a conductor. Grange realized the truth before anyone else. If no one anchored the frequency, Earth itself could implode from harmonic collapse. There was only one stabilizer strong enough to handle it, a living mind. He stepped into the containment vault, alarms screaming around him, and placed his hand on the energy column. "If we must sing," he whispered, "someone has to keep the rhythm." The moment his fingers touched the surface, the current surged into him. Every nerve in his body became light. He could feel the pulse of the oceans, the trembling of the crust, the flickering of the auroras above. For one impossible instant, he saw everything, every human voice, every storm, every sound, as part of the same great harmony. Pain vanished. Identity dissolved. Grange became the song. The core calmed. The chaos folded inward, shaped by his consciousness. The resonance found balance. And then, the thunder truly awakened. Across the globe, the storms synchronized, moving like one heartbeat. The oceans shimmered with light. Every fragment of the Quiet One's signal vanished from existence. What remained was harmony, the voice of a species that had refused to die quietly. On the 12th day, the resonance began to fade. The skies cleared. The seas exhaled. But deep under the ice, where the core now pulsed with steady rhythm, a single human heart still beat inside the light. Voss watched from the surface, her breath fogging the air as dawn broke over the horizon. She could feel the hum beneath her boots, faint, steady, alive. "The world's stable," her assistant said softly. "But the readings show another pattern." She frowned. "What pattern?" "Heartbeat," he said. "Not random. Singular." Voss looked to the sky, where faint auroras shimmered like living threads. In their pattern, she thought she saw a face, briefly, just for a moment, smiling. Somewhere deep below, Grange's voice resonated through the ice, not as sound, but as thunder. "I'm still here." The clouds rolled. Lightning whispered across the horizon. The planet listened. And the thunder kept its promise. The storms had stilled, but the air was wrong. Too quiet. Every instrument, every satellite, every living thing felt the pause that comes when a planet holds its breath before something terrible arrives. For weeks the resonance had hummed steady and calm, anchored by the will of one man buried beneath the ice. Then, on the 43rd day, the hum wavered. It began as a tremor in the upper atmosphere, a faint flicker across the magnetic poles. The auroras shivered, then folded inward, forming spirals that sank toward the equator. In observatories across the world, technicians leaned over trembling monitors as the color bled from the sky. The spectrum was being eaten. Dr. Voss stood on the deck of the Antarctic station, wind slicing across the plain. The horizon looked fractured, light refracting in shards like broken glass. "The resonance is inverting," she said to no one, her voice barely audible through the storm. "Something's forcing it backward." Then the signal came. A pulse so deep it bypassed sound entirely and went straight to the marrow. Every human on Earth felt it, a cold vibration that left the taste of iron on the tongue. Space telescopes caught a shape blooming in orbit, a void flower unfolding where the prime obelisk had died. Out of its center drifted the Quiet Ones, no longer shadow but structure. They had learned the sound of thunder, and now they came to erase it. Cities lost power in sequence, not from damage but from command. Circuits froze. Motors stalled mid-rotation. Even the air itself seemed reluctant to carry vibration. In London, church bells hung motionless after being struck. In New York, thunderclouds formed but made no noise. Voss ran her hands across the console, forcing the manual uplink open. The core's readings were chaotic, heartbeat surging, collapsing, then rising again. "Elias," she whispered into the mic though she knew he could not answer. "You have to fight it. They're here." Beneath the ice, the thunder core thrashed against its containment lattice. Within that storm of light, Grange felt them pressing inward, shapes of perfect silence sliding through the frequencies. They did not speak, they cancelled. He could feel parts of himself unraveling where they touched him, thoughts falling away like snow melting on hot metal. He reached deeper into the resonance, searching for the rhythm that had once bound him to the world. For a moment he found it, the heartbeat of oceans, the chorus of human voices, and poured it outward like fire. The core blazed, flooding the sky with white light. The quiet ones recoiled, but not far. They had changed too. Their forms bent and wavered, turning translucent, mimicking the thunder's pulse with terrifying precision. Every time Grange pushed, they matched his frequency a fraction of a second later, learning, adapting. The resonance war became a mirror fight. Around the planet, lightning crawled without sound, glowing silently through black clouds. Waves rose without roar. Volcanoes erupted in eerie stillness, their fury smothered mid-birth. The world's noise was being devoured. In the command center, Voss watched the last channels die. Her team moved wordlessly, communicating with gestures as even speech began to fail. The air itself no longer carried vibration above a whisper. One by one, her colleagues collapsed, clutching their heads as pressure built behind their eyes. Voss gritted her teeth and stared at the single surviving display, an interface linked directly to the core. In the cascading data she saw flashes of Grange's signal, flickering like a heartbeat buried in static. She realized the truth, he couldn't fight them alone. She tore the neural cable from the console and pressed it against her temple. The connection hit like lightning. The Antarctic vanished. The sky became sound and color. She was falling through waves of frequency, each one a memory, the laughter of a child, the crack of gunfire, the hum of cities at night. And at the center of it all, suspended in the brilliance of the core, was Grange. He looked barely human, a silhouette of light threaded with arcs of electricity. Around him swarmed the quiet ones, their bodies translucent and shifting, like reflections of creatures that could never truly exist. "They're copying you," she said inside the current. "I know," his voice came through as vibration. "They're learning our song. Then give them something they can't understand." He hesitated, then reached out to her. The moment their signals touched, the resonance screamed. Every human on Earth felt it, a flash of memory, a rush of emotion so raw it left the air trembling. Love, fear, defiance, grief, every sound that ever mattered folded into one impossible chord. The quiet ones stopped moving. For the first time since their creation, they hesitated. The chord expanded. It wasn't just energy anymore, it was meaning. The resonance carried memory, language, story. It carried humanity. Voss and Grange pushed harder, weaving thought into sound until the thunder core's surface fractured, releasing streams of luminous plasma into the polar sky. The auroras exploded outward, wrapping the planet in color. The quiet ones screamed, or tried to. Their shapes broke apart as silence failed them. The void flower in orbit imploded, its petals folding inward until nothing remained but a halo of shattered light. The planet shook. Ice cliffs collapsed into the sea. From orbit it looked as though Earth itself had burst into flame. And then, stillness. When the light faded, there were no more shadows above. The instruments came back online one by one. Sound returned in fragments, the crack of falling ice, the distant roll of thunder. People wept at the noise. In the ruins of the Antarctic station, Dr. Voss lay on the floor, frost crusting her suit. The air smelled of ozone. Beneath her, the ice was warm. The core had gone dark, its light extinguished, but she could still feel a faint pulse under her palm. 1 heartbeat. 2. Elias, she whispered. The pulse steadied. Through the thin frost she saw light spreading again, softer this time, gold instead of white. The resonance had changed once more, gentle, harmonic, alive. High above, satellites recorded the phenomenon, a network of faintly glowing lines across the planet's surface, connecting continents like veins of fire. The Thunder network had survived, but it no longer responded to commands. It was autonomous, breathing on its own. Somewhere within that new frequency, hidden deep in the noise, came a voice like distant thunder. We have heard you. And now, so will they. The clouds broke. Rain fell over the silent ice, hissing softly as it met the warm ground. Voss tilted her head back and listened. For the first time in months, the world was loud again. The rain did not stop for 7 days. It fell over blackened cities and quiet seas, washing soot from the skin of a planet reborn. Roads glimmered beneath the water, fields steamed where fire had passed. Everywhere the same sound, the low, steady rhythm of rain meeting earth. Humanity listened as though hearing itself breathe again. In orbit, debris traced slow arcs around the world. Fragments of the quiet ones drifted through the thin blue glow, still evaporating into dust. A few pieces remained whole enough to reflect light, each shard a silent monument to what had been defeated. Their geometry was wrong now, warped by the very frequencies they had tried to erase. Across the surviving networks, the first transmissions began to crawl back online. A single text ping from a deep-sea relay in the Atlantic read, "Alive. Listening." Others followed from mountain bunkers, from ships hidden beneath storms, from orbital stations that had somehow endured. The global silence cracked, and the human voice returned, scattered but unbroken. In the ruins of the Antarctic base, Dr. Voss walked through the skeletal remains of the station. The snow had melted into rivers, carving paths through metal and concrete. The air was warm, carrying a faint vibration that never faded completely, a heartbeat beneath the wind. She moved carefully, following it toward the crater where the core had once burned. What she found was not a crater anymore. The ice had fused into translucent stone, smooth and luminous from within. The Thunder core no longer existed as a machine, it had become something else, a living lattice of energy that pulsed like breathing crystal. When she stepped closer, it answered with a ripple that hummed through her bones. She closed her eyes and listened. Beneath the vibration she heard a whisper that was not a voice but a memory, Elias Grange's laugh, distant and human. She sat beside the glow for a long time, speaking softly into the air. The core did not reply, but the rain outside shifted, thunder murmuring faintly in rhythm with her words. It felt like a promise kept. Weeks later, the world began to change in ways no one expected. Plants grew faster, bending toward the subtle resonance in the soil. The oceans carried new tones that whales followed across entire hemispheres. Power grids hummed without fuel, drawing energy from the low-frequency pulse that circled the planet. Scientists called it the residual field, poets called it the heartbeat. No one truly understood it, and that seemed to comfort people. For the first time in generations, mystery felt like hope instead of fear. From orbit, cameras captured the global pattern of the Thunder network. It glowed faintly at night, lines of soft gold tracing continents, oceans, islands. The pattern wasn't random. When processed through audio filters, it formed rhythm. When accelerated, it became a song. The song was human. Recordings spread fast. Children learned to hum it before they learned to write. It became part of ceremonies, broadcasts, lullabies. Every nation heard its own language hidden in the undertones, as though the resonance carried the history of every voice that had ever spoken. Humanity's collective noise had become a kind of harmony, encoded in the planet itself. The quiet ones never returned. Their systems, once perfect in silence, had fractured beyond repair. But telescopes on the far side of the moon captured something remarkable, a ripple moving outward from Earth, expanding into the dark, carrying the same harmonic signature. It traveled faster than any transmission, bending space around it. The universe was listening. Dr. Voss lived to see the first response. It came years later, when a deep space observatory detected an echo, distant but clear. A returning wave, carrying fragments of the thunder's song mixed with something new. Patterns within patterns. Voices that had never belonged to Earth. The day it arrived, she climbed to the ridge above the station ruins. The sky burned orange with sunset, and the air vibrated softly under her feet. She felt the resonance swell, building like the breath before thunder. Then it came, not as destruction, but as greeting. A single pulse rolled across the planet, low and kind, filled with sound that was both alien and familiar. People everywhere stopped what they were doing and listened. In that moment, the entire world synchronized, the same rhythm moving through billions of hearts. It wasn't command or invasion. It was acknowledgement. The echo said, without words, "We hear you." And Earth answered, without fear, "Then listen." The storms began again, gentle this time, clouds glowing with threads of gold. Lightning danced across oceans like laughter. The sound carried farther than the wind, through the thin atmosphere, into the dark beyond the moon. Humanity's thunder had become an invitation. Years turned into decades. Cities rebuilt, shaped around the new resonance. Towers of glass and steel rose in harmonic intervals, humming quietly at dawn. Ships left orbit, their drives tuned to the same frequencies that once saved the world. The phrase that once meant defiance, Earth replied with thunder, became a proverb of creation. Children used it when they invented, when they dreamed. Dr. Voss spent her last days near the Antarctic plain, where the core's glow still shimmered beneath the ice. When her strength began to fade, she asked to be left alone with the sound. The technicians watched from a distance as the glow brightened around her, wrapping her in light. The instruments recorded a final surge through the network, then peace. No trace of her body was found, only a faint warmth in the ice, pulsing steadily. From then on, whenever thunder rolled across the poles, it carried a softer note within it, something like a woman's voice humming under her breath. Some said it was the core remembering its creator. Others believed it was the earth itself, singing to keep the silence away. In the centuries that followed, travelers from other worlds came cautiously, tracing the echo that reached them across the void. They expected conquest, or warning. What they found was music, rivers of sound woven through the planet's fields, cities that glowed with rhythm, people who greeted them not with weapons but with welcome. They asked, carefully, how it had begun. The elders would smile and tell the story. Once, the stars demanded silence. And the world answered. With thunder. And so, the war ended not in words, but in echoes. The stars still remember the sound that rose from our world. A defiance so loud, it became legend. If you felt the thunder tonight, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe for more stories that echo through the void. Because out there in the dark, silence is never the end. It's just the moment before we speak. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the stars.